right, Donald Trump on his way to Minnesota right now, a state so solidly Democratic that it has not voted Republican since 1972. And then he's going to head to another Democratic stronghold, Michigan, yet another state once seen as a safe bet for Hillary Clinton. Hillary, at one time, had what many call just an insurmountable lead in the battleground states, but now suddenly, as he gains momentum, that firewall is crumbling. Joining me right now with a look at all of it, pollster Lee Carter, conservative commentator Gina Loudon, Democratic strategist John Rowley, and Bill Whelan from the Hoover Institute. Good to have all you here. Lee, starting with you. People are saying he could actually turn some of these historically blue states red. Your thoughts?
I think anything is possible in this election. So I think as we're looking at these polls, it's so hard to predict who is actually turning out. So likely voters are what these polls are made of. I think we're seeing that in North Carolina and Florida, we're seeing that Hispanic vote is coming out more than expected. They're not counted in likely voters. I think the traditional Reagan Democrats who haven't voted in places like Minnesota, like Michigan, for a long time are going to be coming out in record numbers. So I think that we're going to see quite a switch on Election Day from what we're seeing in the poll.
Wow. I mean, Gina, this is what people are anticipating. Hey, look, this is what we saw with Brexit, right? All the polls basically said there was no chance that the UK was going to separate from the EU. And then all of a sudden, as you got days closer to the event, the polls started to narrow. We started to see things sort of shift, much like we're seeing now. And then what do you know? Lo and behold, the EU, or the UK rather, said bye-bye to the EU. I mean, are we witnessing potentially a similar phenomenon here?
I think that was very inspiring for people who were hoping for an outsider to come in and do the things that Mr. Trump has done. I think it might account even partly for the momentum that we're seeing. He comes in with that outsider status. That's what voters, especially the undecided voters, that's what they'll tend to gravitate to once they're actually in that voting booth. But we saw the enthusiasm gap in the latest Fox poll that tells us that enthusiasm gap is getting even wider in Mr. Trump's favor. So you combine those three factors, and I think he has reason to feel optimistic.
Let's zero in on a state like New Hampshire, John Rowley, my home state, and suddenly you've seen a real turnaround in those polls. Hillary Clinton had been leading. Now they're neck and neck. What happened to her?
Very clearly, I mean, about 9 days ago, there was a black swan in this race, which was the FBI announcement. This campaign was over then, and so that's really been a game changer. And so as you look at states like whether it's New Hampshire, Florida, Nevada, a lot of different places, even the bluer states of Michigan and Pennsylvania, there is plenty of good and bad news all over the place for either side. And I think really there's probably a competing turnout model, and they're not mutually exclusive. Is there going to be a tidal wave of Latino and Hispanic turnout, which is a total rejection of Trump and an attraction to Hillary? But then also is Trump's silent majority of the sticks, this rural vote, which we see in a lot of places, is turning out.
I can tell you, John, you're sounding remarkably middle of the road right now. Usually, which I'm wondering if you're getting nervous now, if you can't call this, because you've been so much sort of under the assumption that Hillary Clinton would take this in a landslide, and I think yourself and other pundits, frankly, have started to back away from that in a way that is very interesting right now to watch. Your thoughts, Bill?
Well, I think both sides should be nervous because in this election, I was doing the math before we went on the air. There are 6 or 7 states that go red to blue or blue to red in this election. Trish, if you go back to 2012, only 2 states flipped from one side to the other, Indiana and North Carolina. Look, you go from 3 different time zones and find states in all these time zones that could change. This is great. The one thing about this election, which I find fascinating, it's like watching the Super Bowl in that both candidates have come to a core strategy. Her strategy is turnout. She's going to marshal her forces through early vote and then ground game on Election Day. And Trump is hoping for, frankly, a cosmic force that, like you mentioned with Brexit,
but isn't that
voters
turnout
are going to
too? Isn't that enthusiasm?
Well, enthusiasm too, and you're going to see this, for example, a good place to look at this is Ohio right now. CBS YouGov came out with their battleground tracker poll this morning. Hillary has a 63-13 lead among early voters, but you look on the other side as to enthusiasm, and Trump enjoys the enthusiasm side, so
and let's
he
not
may
forget
prevail on election day because
right?
of that.
Since some of those early ballots were cast. I mean, John was just making the point that this election may shift dramatically as a result of the FBI investigation.
And
Lee,
don't forget one other.
Hang on, I'll come back to you in a second. But what are you seeing right now, Lee, in terms of sentiment among voters who were in the middle, independents. I mean, we've got the Fox News poll, right, which suggests that a lot of independents are increasingly going for Trump. What is your data showing?
So we are seeing 8% lead in Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton in the independents. There were times we saw more. But I do think that right now the independents are leaning towards Donald Trump. Whenever I'm doing my dial test and looking and focusing on the message, he is winning them over. And the reason is it's not necessarily about Donald Trump. And I think that's what people have to understand. This is not about the man Donald Trump. This is about the anti-establishment. We need to do things differently. D.C. needs to be blown up. We're tired of the corruption. Everything that's come out in the last few weeks about WikiLeaks and Comey has indicated this backroom politics that's not for the people, it's for the elite, and I think it's got people upset and more likely to vote for Donald Trump than they would be before.
Wow, it's interesting. Gina, you originally were not a Donald Trump supporter. You came around through the primary process. Is one of your biggest concerns as a voter, as a conservative, this idea that somehow the system is rigged and that the political elites have just taken over?
Well, we've seen that, and I know that to be true. I'm married to a former state senator, and I've seen how the establishment works, and I know that there is a huge force, both, Republican people who at least call themselves Republicans and Democrats who've been against Mr. Trump. But I also think that he has done a marvelous job, Trish, of working that to his advantage and saying, hey, I am the outsider candidate, sort of rejecting that label and just running as almost an independently minded conservative who is constitutionally based. I think that will win those undecided that want the outsider vote.
It is that you're the outsider, and I think that people are increasingly getting so fed up with both parties that they don't want to see someone who's just beholden to a party itself. He certainly has not been beholden to any party, for sure. Anyway, Lee, Gina, John, and Bill, thank you so much. Good to have you all here. It's going to be an interesting 2 days to go.